Icebreakers. How many of us have given so many of them you could probably write your own autobiography? As Herb mentioned, most of us are aware of the phrase 6 degrees of separation, where I could probably take myself and through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend get connected with somebody famous or some event. Well, that's a linear type of progression. What I call the multiplicative inverse of that is that think of yourself in the center of a star pattern where instead of being connected linearly, you have rays going out that connect you with a single person. That's what I mean by the reverse of the 6 degrees of separation. In my case, I started recognizing early on that I had these weird parallels to Charles Lindbergh. Starting with the fact that I grew up in San Diego. If you've ever been there or know of it, you know that Lindbergh Field, the airport, was named after Charles Lindbergh. Ryan Aeronautics, that's in San Diego, was the company that built the Spirit of St. Louis. Somewhat disconnected is that some years later, I was able to pass my tests and get my general class ham radio license and received my call sign, which was N6NTC. San Diego, at one time, was the base for the Naval Training Center in Point Loma. So NTC, Naval Training Center, another connection. But I go on. You all know that I was in the Air Force, and from 1980 to 84, I was stationed at Chanute Air Force Base. What's the connection? Lindbergh actually trained there in 1924 for the Army Air Corps. Of course, we all know about his transatlantic flight in 1927. Here comes another connection. Lindbergh's plane, if you've ever seen the movie The Spirit of St. Louis or seen the plane, the registration number of the plane is NX-211. Okay, what's the connection? Years later, when I was commissioned in the Civil Air Patrol and was Director of Communications, I was given a Civil Air Patrol radio call sign. What was it? In California, all radio call signs for Civil Air Patrol begin with Eagle and a number. In my case, it was Eagle 211. Same number as the plane. There's the connection with Charles Lindbergh again. At the time, I was single by myself, had this call sign, I was from San Diego. Everybody started connecting the dots, if you will. And they said, guess what? Dave is the lone eagle, as far as the radio operators were concerned. What was Lindbergh called when he made his transatlantic flight? The lone eagle. There again, the connection to Charles Lindbergh. I mean, it's uncanny how throughout my life there's been these connections to Charles Lindbergh and things that he was associated with. I've always found it interesting that I had all these radial connections to Charles Lindbergh, and the thought occurred to me that, you know, 6 degrees of separation is one thing, but if you ever took the time, maybe out of curiosity or somebody pointed it out to you, that think of yourself as the center and see if you have these multiple connections, say to a famous person or an event. No matter how distant or far conceived it could be, it's an interesting exercise that you can go through. In my experience, it's just everything seemed to be, I was the center and Charles Lindbergh was the outlining points that seem to highlight my life. Think about it. You might find something interesting along the way. Mr. Tucker.